Hey everybody, I wanted to give you a little bit of background information on the revolutionary readings that we are reading this week. I think it's really cool because we find out that a lot of the writings influenced the revolutions, and one piece of work influenced another country's revolution around the world. So let's get started, and we'll start with one that most of us are familiar with, the U.S. Declaration of Independence. And most of us know that it was written by Thomas Jefferson around 1776. But what we might not realize is that a lot of the content was based on some of the Enlightenment philosophies and philosophers of the time, such as Rousseau, and that's kind of crazy after reading Confessions, and Voltaire, and some of the others that we discussed or we read about before. And so the Declaration really focuses on individual rights, human rights, and not being imposed, things not being imposed by the government. Although many of the ideas in the Declaration weren't necessarily new when Jefferson wrote them, no country had ever been founded on those kind of ideas and beliefs. And so the Continental Congress approved the Declaration of Independence on, on July 4th. That's why we celebrate 1776. And the United States, well, it became the United States. So the Declaration of Independence not only is known for its rules of governing, but it also is known for starting out with, rather than complaints, it started out with it's based on these truths are self-evident, right? And it took a while before they actually got to the part where they started listing all the grievances against King George III. So that's something that had not been done prior to when Jefferson wrote the Declaration. Only after the truce does he really start talking about the terrible conditions that they lived in. So that was unique. The United States Declaration of Independence is really still one of the most well-known, popular, whatever the word you want to use, term is, political documents. Famous, there you go. The next piece we read was the Declarations of Rights of Man and of Citizen. And this piece was written after the storming of the Bastille, which was on July 14th, 1789. So similar to the Continental Congress, the French National Assembly focused on human rights. And Thomas Jefferson was actually, interestingly enough, in Paris. He was actually working there. He's a representative there. And when the Declaration was written, and he actually helped work on some of the drafting of the wording and content to make sure it all sounded the way they wanted it to sound. So as you have seen, the rights, or you'll see, the rights in this piece are quite different from those that we find in the Declaration of Independence. The rights of woman. Okay, I'm going to pronounce her name. I looked it up on YouTube, so I'm going to give it my best shot. It's Olympe de Gouges. She was quite a radical woman for her time period. Radical thoughts in a woman, that was totally unheard of. So she wasn't really always de Gouges. She was actually born, Marie was her name, and her parents were from the lower to middle income bracket. Her dad was a butcher, and her mom worked in houses, and she was kind of a day servant kind of thing. She created this new persona of Olympe de Gouges when she became a playwright, and she did some acting, and she was really one of the top intellectuals of her time, which, remember, again, this was not a time when women normally did things like this. She proposed some things that just seemed unheard of to the French at this time. Things such as ending slavery, giving rights to orphans and unwed mothers. Just imagine how it's kind of like a moment with Swift, right? Some of her political ideologies were so radical that even separated her from people who were on her side. The Rights of Woman is actually a revision of the Declarations of the Rights of Man and of Citizen. It's kind of the flip side of that. And it demanded the same rights be given to women that were given to men in the previous piece. And one of her favorite demands, I thought this was funny, is basically, I think it was number 10, where she said that if women can get on a platform to be executed or killed, then they surely should be able to get on a platform to speak. Her words eventually got her into trouble, and she got up on that platform in the guillotine during the Reign of Terror in 1793, and she died. The final piece is Liberty or Death. I looked his name up also. Is Jean-Jacques Dessalines. Okay, anyway. He was a slave from an island colony in the Caribbean, and France made a lot of money off of this colony because they produced sugar, coffee, tobacco, and cotton. They had over 500,000 slaves to tend the crops on the island. And many of the people on the island, the freed slaves, the white landowners or plantation owners, the upper class, they all started fighting over property and rights that they had received based on the Declaration of the Rights of Man. And so after this fighting started, the slaves started thinking, wait, what? We need to get some rights here too. So they had an uprising, and they started a war that lasted more than 10 years. Because the French had trouble defeating this new army, they couldn't do it. They freed the slaves thinking, well, if we free them, maybe we can still keep the island and everything will be happily ever after. But after the leader of the rebellion for the slaves rebellion, after he was defeated and exiled by Napoleon, Dessalines took over and became the leader. And so he defeated the French troops. He defeated everybody that came up against him. And he crowned himself emperor and named the new island Haiti. So that's how Haiti came to be. They do, if you watch videos on YouTube, they do give him the recognition of being the founder of the country. And so the proclamation that he wrote, just remember, the really interesting thing about this proclamation that you're reading is he was a slave. He was a former slave himself. So he had not had any education, or any formal education. Anything he learned, I mean, obviously he learned to read and write. He learned on his own, or somebody else taught him, but not in a school situation. So it's pretty amazing, because not only did this proclamation get published in Haiti and France and lots of other places, it actually was published in over 50 newspapers in the United States. So he was assassinated in 1806. People were they had mixed feelings about him. They really respected his willingness to stand up and continue to fight and to press on until the victory was won. But they all weren't so comfortable necessarily with this whole thing about him crowning himself emperor and everything else. So it was an interesting time for that colony and what we know now as the country of Haiti. I hope this gives you a little bit more insight as you read the different revolutions. They're not long pieces. I know they're a little difficult to read, but I just think it's interesting to have this view of what was going on in France, how it applied to us in the United States, and how countries like Haiti actually came to be. I hope you enjoy your readings. Have a great week.